2 years ago, Americans watched in horror as a crisis unfolded at the Kabul airport.
There's desperation and anguish.
More than 80,000 Afghans have since arrived in America, but this story is still unfolding. I'm Andrea Smartin. In my new podcast, Stranger Becomes Neighbor, we'll find out what happens to these new arrivals in our communities. Who would help our newest neighbors? Follow us at kslpodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you listen.
You're listening to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction, but more importantly, about recovery. My name is Casey Scott, and if you know somebody who needs some help, have them do what I did and give Pinnacle Recovery Center a call. Our guest today is Nicole Hawkins. She's with Center for Change. We're going to talk to her in just a second, but of course, we always go over to Dr. Matt, freshly from the barbershop.
Yeah, it took you a while to notice, but, that's all right.
What, are we dating?
Sort of.
Well, so
every Thursday.
Every Thursday, yeah. We're here.
Date night.
I love it.
Yeah.
But so when you go in and get that haircut?
When did I?
No, when you do.
Oh, when I do.
What do you ask for?
That's a whole rabbit hole. I hate getting my haircut.
Because I
hate getting my haircut. I don't know what to ask for.
I just got a haircut the other day.
Yeah.
And I said, she goes, what do you want? And I said, well, my girlfriend said I have an old man's haircut.
Yeah.
And she goes, well, yeah, you kind of do. And I was like,
What does that even mean?
Well, because it's kind of like yours. It's just kind of all one length. And I said, well, let's not make it an old man haircut.
I prefer to think of mine as a Golden Girls haircut.
I like that.
Yeah.
Blanche was the hottest Golden Girl.
Yeah, and I think I have a Blanche vibe going on with
Do
my
you?
hair.
I don't think you're a Blanche.
No?
No, I think I'm more of the Blanche.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah.
No, I was getting really long. I hadn't had a haircut in 6 months. Did you know that?
Were you saving money?
Yeah, it's my retirement plan.
Okay, I like that.
Professors, we have to, scrimp and save.
Sure.
Yeah, so I just got mostly the back. I mostly got the back cut off because you were teasing me about having a mullet.
Well, that's what I'm going for because I'm getting ready to go on a cruise with my girlfriend, and I wanted to support a mullet.
Yeah,
and get
gonna get you an Iron Maiden T-shirt and a hacky sack too?
And a mankini, you know what I mean, and just go, hey, party up on the Lido deck.
Yeah,
and because we're going with like 14 of her friends.
Oh, so you want to make a good impression?
Yeah, a bunch of people turning 40.
Yeah, there you
go. Until they see this 46-year-old body, right?
You're gonna show them how to do it.
You know what I say? I got a dad's bod and a mom's car, GMC Acadia.
There you go.
That's right. And I'm cool with it.
An old man haircut.
And an old man haircut.
Yeah.
How did I get a girlfriend?
I don't know, because she is fine.
Yeah.
She knows how to dress.
Wait.
No, she is. I can say that. I can say that. She's a good-looking lady.
Okay.
Well-spoken. She's tall and beautiful, and she knows how to dress you.
Hey, yeah. Guess what? I'm wearing 2 things of Lululemon today.
Right, and that's only because of her.
100%.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I've got a Lululemon hat.
Is that what that is?
That's a Lululemon hat.
It doesn't say Lululemon on it.
I think that's what you want. It's like when you buy stuff from Old Navy. Old Navy's got good clothes if it doesn't say Old Navy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know she got fancy shoes on, too.
Yeah. So you want to know about these shoes?
Sure, I guess.
So she said these shoes are good with jeans or slacks. So they're universal. So you're going to actually get more use out of them.
Oh, so she's smart and fashionable.
She's fashion forward.
I don't know.
Depeche Mode.
Well, I do. I mean, she must see something in you, Casey. I guess it's the thing we all see in you. We love you. You're lovable.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm really excited, and this podcast has been in the works for probably 3-4 months, Carrie?
Yep.
3-4 months because Nicole Hawkins is very busy, and she's here to share her story. Now, what I'm excited about is that we've been looking to get a guest to come on and talk about eating disorders.
And it's been a struggle.
I get a lot of people that reach out on Facebook and Instagram and say that, 'cause some of the stuff we talk about, their addiction is eating, and they use that to help them.
Right.
And so it's great to have somebody come on and talk about their fight and their story and share it with us.
And it's a complicated psychological and emotional issue. It exists on a continuum of a lot of different sorts of behaviors. I think professionals like Nicole and others who work primarily in that field understand that no two people necessarily look alike who have struggles in that realm of eating disorders and body dysmorphic issues. And therefore, it's sometimes hard to know when a person should reach out for help or if a family member or loved one reaches out for help. So I hope listeners today will take that to heart and consider what she has to say.
All right, Nicole, where does your story begin?
Yeah, so I'll tell you about myself. So I'm a psychologist and grew up here in Salt Lake and went to a local high school and had no eating issues, no body image issues at all. I went away to college in Northern California. I went to a private college, felt a lot of pressure there. I didn't feel like I was smart enough. I didn't feel like I was good enough. I didn't really fit in. And in this private university, and you have to understand, this is back in the late 80s, they sat all of the women down and they told us, they sat us in the orientation, in a gym, and they told us, do not gain the freshman 15.
Because that's a thing.
Well, it is a thing, and the reason it's a thing is because women's bodies are still developing and changing. Our high school body is not our adult woman body. So our bodies are still changing, and for men, they're still gaining height in college, right? So they told us...
Well, Casey and I didn't.
Yeah, I'm sure you...
We missed that class.
Yeah, exactly.
We clept out.
Yeah. So they said, don't gain the freshman 15, and our cafeteria was called the Benson, and they say you don't want to get the Benson butt. So you need to understand a little bit about my personality and some people that are vulnerable to an eating disorder. So I'm what you would call in psychology a turtle. So a turtle, they're kind of harm avoidant. They don't want to do anything wrong. They don't like conflict. They don't like to rock the boat. They're kind of a people pleaser. They're highly anxious. So I'm always highly sensitive to everyone in the room, their needs. I'm taking all that information in, and then I want to make a decision based on that. So people that are turtles are usually very prone to anxiety. They're very prone to anorexia. There's another group called the hares, which I think Casey's a hare.
Oh, you bet.
Hares or rabbits, they're these kind of high energy. They can make decisions quick. They don't need a lot of information. They just go. They're adrenaline junkies. They like to be the life of the party. They're also very prone to addictions. They're prone more to substance abuse. And then in the eating disorder, they're more prone to bulimia. So for me, I'm this turtle. I don't feel like I belong at college anyway. Now I even have the faculty saying don't gain the freshman 15. So in my mind, being harm avoidant, I think, well, I'll lose 15 pounds. So it started off very healthy. I was just on a diet. I started running. We know with eating disorders, though, about 35% of all eating disorders start off by someone dieting. So I was dieting, I was watching what I was eating, I became a vegetarian because, again, with the eating disorder population, they're highly sensitive. If I show them a documentary on animals or slaughterhouses, they're all going to stop eating meat because they care so much. So I basically went into a period of anorexia where I was eating very little. My food groups got extremely narrow. I lost a whole bunch of weight. I didn't think I had a problem. I thought I had a lot of willpower. I thought I was very in control. People were giving me feedback, concerned about me. I said, I'm fine. I'm doing great. So the anorexia went for several months, on to a year probably.
Can I just stop you there 1 second, just so everybody at home knows what we're talking about? So just some definitions real quick. So bulimia is?
So that's what I'm going to get to. Bulimia is what I went to next. So bulimia is when you're overeating, you're binging, and then you're using some kind of compensatory behavior. So you're purging, you're taking laxatives, you're doing excessive exercise to burn those calories. Anorexia is when you're restricting your calories, you're not eating enough. Even, again, when you're losing weight, you're not acknowledging it, you're getting medical problems, you're thinking you look fine, even though...
You're underweight in an unhealthy...
Yes.
In a very unhealthy way. But isn't that really common where the person who is beginning that process of anorexia, they refuse or are unable to see it, right?
And the truth is for most, if you look at anyone struggling with an addiction, you want to look 6 months before they got it. What was going on? Why were they feeling more vulnerable? They're probably more depressed. They're probably more anxious. We know for the eating disorder population, 86% of them have kind of like an anxiety disorder prior to the eating disorder. So what's the vulnerability? And that we find, though, with the eating disorder population, once they start restricting, setting those rules, they actually feel better. The serotonin levels in their brain actually change. They feel calmer. So the eating disorder works. If it didn't work, they wouldn't keep it. So they feel better. So it's really hard to get them into treatment. It's hard for adolescents. They kind of already, their prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed. They don't want our help. and they feel better. So when I developed my eating disorder, I felt more confident. I felt more outgoing. I felt more social. I got more social praise, mostly from women saying, oh, my gosh, you look so great. So I was really happy. You couldn't have put me in recovery when I was anorexic.
Let me ask you, when you showed up to college, do you feel like you needed to lose like if you look back on it, were you overweight in any way?
No, I've been pretty thin my entire life, so I was not even overweight. I was a very normal body size. I was very comfortable in my body. But again, I was feeling very insecure. I didn't fit in. I didn't really have a friend group. And so again, when we're struggling, we think, well, I'll just lose weight and everything will be better. You think of, 90% of all women diet in the course of the year and up to 72% of all men diet in the course of the year. Men don't talk about their diets. Women do. But a lot of people are hoping, well, if I change my food and I change my body, I'll feel better. So I think that's how I went into it, is I thought I'll feel better. And so it started, but over time, what we find and what the research will say, for example, girls that diet in 9th grade, by 12th grade are more likely to be binge eaters. So if you look at what happened to me, I'm restricting. I'm anorexic. I really like it. I'm happy. What do I start doing, though? I start overeating. I start binging. And then I feel out of control, and I feel hopeless. And so then I start purging. So once the purging started, I couldn't deny that I had a problem. But I didn't tell anyone. No one in my life knew. The research says that the average person with an eating disorder will struggle for 4 years before they'll even talk to someone. We have a lot of smart parents out there now, and they're catching their kids quicker. They're intervening faster. And so for example, on my adolescent unit at the Center for Change, most of my adolescents are not there because they want to be. It's because they have wise parents that are getting them help. So once I turned full bulimic, that's when I truly felt out of control. That's when I wasn't socializing anymore. And I think that's when I really felt like the addiction took over my life. I wasn't going out on Friday and Saturday nights. Here I'm in college in California.
So you're isolating. Mm-hmm. I mean, to put it in addiction terms.
To engage in my disorder. I found more comfort in my disorder than I did in other people.
So you'd make plans to stay home and binge? Is that what you're saying?
And binge and purge, yeah. So, and you feel so isolated from other people because think of every social event is around food.
Mm-hmm.
So you go out with people and you're already uncomfortable. You don't want to eat. And so I would restrict all week long and then go out on the weekends and try to eat normal around people so they didn't think I had a problem.
Keep up appearance.
Exactly. So, but then by the time it got so bad, I wasn't even going out and I was abusing laxatives. And I think, people will say anorexia has the highest mortality rate of any psychiatric illness. It's in all the textbooks. It's what we teach the graduate students. But the truth is bulimia has a far more high mortality rate. We just don't track those deaths. So the research used to say, 7 days of purging or abusing laxatives or diuretics will stop the heart, the sodium potassium levels, and it just make that electrical current stop. Then they said, no, 3 days. Now they say 1 episode of purging. And when I say episode of purging, when people purge, if I would purge in the morning, it wasn't that I purged 1 time. I could purge 20 times.
Whoa.
After I ate, right? So if I had 3 episodes of purging a day, that could be 60 purging events. That can stop the heart. So 1 day of that behavior will stop the heart. Those deaths are not recorded as eating disorder deaths.
Why is that, do you think?
Because they say you can't die from a psychiatric illness. So it goes on their death certificate as cardiac arrest. So we're not counting those deaths. So we don't even really know the mortality rates of eating disorders. So when I was active in my bulimia, I'm going to the gym twice a day. I'm abusing laxatives. I'm taking diuretics. I'm taking diet pills. I'm having chest pain all the time. But back then, I didn't know how lethal eating disorders were, so I would just maybe think, I'm not going to exercise as much today. So it got so out of control, no one in my life knew, because I was isolated in California. So no one knew I had an eating disorder.
Like your family, when they saw you or you came home for a break, they didn't mention your weight?
They thought I looked good.
College looks good on you.
Yeah. People thought I looked good, so people really were not that concerned, and I was still performing well academically. I was still getting good grades.
Checking all the boxes.
I was the president of the psychology club. I was working at Stanford Stream Institute. I was doing all these things. So people are like, well, you look great. So for me, there was no way I was going to admit I had a problem. So, but when I was finally applying for graduate school, I knew I knew
So this lasted all through undergrad?
All through undergrad, my entire undergrad. So I literally joke that I have no friends from college, and it's true. I don't have any friends from college because I was in my addiction the entire time, and people, I had a lot of acquaintances, but no one was close. I like to, when I run groups with my patients, I put a pillow up and I have conversations with them with pillows blocking us. And I say that's what it's like to have a relationship with someone in an addiction. You're not really ever connecting to them. They think they're connecting to you, but you're not letting them in. You have walls up, right? Mm-hmm. And so we keep these walls up. So when I finally knew I was going to go to graduate school, my junior year, I'm applying. Back then, I thought psychologists were like mind readers. I thought, oh my gosh, I'll show up at graduate school and everyone will immediately know I have an eating disorder. Well, that's not really how it works. I could have probably hid it for years, but the truth is I knew I didn't want to anymore. I knew I didn't want to live that way. I knew, unfortunately, that sick attracts sick. So if I'm sick, I'm only going to be friends with sick people because I was more comfortable with that. I was hanging out with all the alcoholics. I was hanging out with all the drug addicts. That's who I was comfortable with because I didn't feel like they'd point the finger back at me.
Yeah, they're not judging.
Yeah, they're not judging me. They were my people. That's who I felt comfortable with. So when I finally decided to stop purging and stop taking laxatives, because if you want to ruin your social life, abuse laxatives, you're not going anywhere, right?
You want to ruin your day.
Yeah, exactly.
Abuse laxatives.
Yeah, you're not going. And so talk about isolating. So then I finally stopped purging and using laxatives, but I didn't stop binging. So then my weight's going up. I gained 30 pounds pretty quick. I'm feeling more and more out of control, but I knew that's what I had to do to kind of break the cycle. So I eventually had some recovery under my belt, was doing very well. And so I talk about when we're in the recovery process, and Casey, maybe you can relate, I talk about like I had this great foundation. I was doing really well. I had built this beautiful house in my mind of what my recovery looked like. I planted flowers in the front yard. And 2 months into my recovery, I burnt my house to the ground. I was the worst I'd ever been. I went back to the most extreme behaviors I've ever done. But what I tell my patients, because no one's going to have a perfect recovery, is when we burn down that house, what's left? Our foundation. Yep. The skills we learned in treatment, right? What you learned, you've been able to recover. You've been able to have sobriety. So we have those foundations. We have those blueprints. We build the house again. And we build it a little bit different because we learn from our mistakes. We find out what our triggers are. So for me, a trigger was spring. A trigger was going on a diet. I was going to see my ex-boyfriend that I had broke up with him. I was going to a wedding. I was going to see him. So I decided, well, I need to lose weight.
I want to make him jealous.
Yeah, exactly. I got to lose weight. Well, 2 weeks into trying to lose weight, I was full-blown into behaviors again. So I rebuilt my house. And then I burnt it down again. And then I built it again, and I burned it down again. So I burned my house down 3 times in recovery. Some of my patients joke. They say, Nicole, I not only burnt my house down, I took the whole neighborhood out with me. Like, right? Like I desolated everything. And that's okay, as long as we learn from our mistakes. And so my whole model of recovery is all about self-correction. So I try to teach my patients. I basically want to teach them to build a parachute. Because when I think about recovery, for me, I always had like one foot ready to say, I'm diving in, I'm going to fully recover. But boy, I had that other foot planted into my eating disorder because I still wanted to be a certain body weight. I still wanted to be a vegetarian. I didn't want to eat red meat. I still wanted to over-exercise. But boy, did I want to get rid of diuretics and laxatives and purging. Yeah. Oh, those behaviors are bad. So you think about some of them.
You were negotiating.
Mm-hmm,
I was. Were negotiating your recovery.
This is what I'm going to keep and this is what I'm going to give up. So I tried to do that for a while. But eventually I realized if I'm going to fully recover, I got to jump off that edge. And it felt like a cliff because I was far more comfortable in my eating disorder. That was what I knew.
It was comfortable.
Yeah, and I loved it. And I thought I was going to miss it. I was going to miss binging. I was going to miss purging, as bad as that seems. And not to be gross, but purging in an eating disorder is very different than when you have the flu or you're sick. It's a different feeling. It's a different experience. So I was like, I'm going to miss that. I don't know if I want to let it go. So I finally decided to jump off the cliff and everyone says you just got to trust. Life is going to be better. You just got to let go of the...
That's what they're selling.
Yep, that right. So I jumped off the cliff, but the first time I don't think I had my parachute packed, and I don't think my parachute was fully up. So a couple years ago, I did some research, and the goal is to eventually write a book, which I finally have started, but to look at like the 9-10 things that's essential for people in recovery that they need in their parachute if they want to survive recovery, because it's hard. I mean, and that's why the relapse rates are so high. So some of the things that were important to my recovery and that have been...
Let me have you hold and wait those right there. We're
Okay.
going to come back and we're going to find out more from Nicole what essentials you need to pack in your recovery backpack.
It's the story of an American held in a dark Venezuelan prison.
Then all of a sudden they all kind of lined up. They pointed their guns at me. And this is the point where I thought, I'm going to die today.
I'm Becky Bruce. I spent a year working on Hope in Darkness, which now has more than 2 million downloads. Find it on kslpodcast.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.
All right, so we got a backpack. We're getting ready to get into recovery, and we're loading it up. And you said you've got 10 essentials that you need to, you should have in your backpack.
Yeah, and so for these, a lot of these are I fine-tune for my eating disorder patients, but I'll keep them general too for everyone. So one of the main things I look for is we've got to have structure and support. So what is our day going to look like? So I'll give you an example. When I had my eating disorder and I was bulimic, I would do pretty well until noon. I could go to classes. I could eat breakfast. I would work out in the morning. And then from about 1 p.m. to 9 p.m., I was engaged in behaviors. Binging and purging and then going back to the gym and weighing myself like 30 times a day. So when I had to look at recovery, what was I going to do the entire afternoon? Now, granted, I had no friends. I had no social network. So I had to look at when are my most vulnerable times and what structure do I need to put in place. So for me, I would structure out my time. I'm going to go to the library for this amount of time. I'm going to go to the coffee shop for this amount of time. Like having structure in place. So I always, when I work with my patients and it's the weekend, I say, what's your plan tomorrow? If they don't have a plan, they're going to engage in behaviors. So I don't need it detailed out, but for eating disorder patients, I want you to write down like when you're going to eat breakfast. Is it between 8 and 9 a.m.? When are you going to eat lunch? When are you going to eat dinner? And so really teaching them the value of eating 3 meals a day and snacks. We teach all of our patients a concept called intuitive eating. There's great books out there on intuitive eating. We just had Evelyn Triboli do our keynote at our conference. She's one of the authors. She has a workbook. So anyone that's just struggling with eating in general or binge eating, that's a great book for them. It really teaches there's no good and bad foods. So putting that structure in place with meals, but then for all of us, do you guys have like a sleep structure? Do you actually think about how many hours at night you're going to get sleep? Do you have regular sleep times? That's really important, number one, with depression. But the other thing that's important with eating disorder patients is their cravings. If I don't get enough sleep, what's going to happen the next day? What am I going to crave?
Sugar.
Sugar, carbs, caffeine.
But see, that plays into the recovery world for substance abuse as well, is that, I used to think that, man, I don't need structure. I don't need somebody telling me what to do. And then I spend 45 days in Pinnacle, and I was like, I think I'd like a schedule.
Exactly.
A schedule's kind of cool, because that's when I would get in trouble, because I would work until 11 o'clock, and all my friends had normal jobs, and I was left to my own device, and I was like, a beer on the deck sounds great, and so that's when I would start to, that was my playtime.
And looking at, okay, when's my most vulnerable time? When I get off work. So what do I need to do? Maybe I don't go home when I get off work. So working at when do we engage in behaviors? When are we most vulnerable? What structure am I going to put in place to do that? So I really like them to write out a structure, to actually have a plan, to have a weekend plan. If it's around the holidays, to have a holiday plan. But I never like to write any structure down because I didn't want to be accountable. And what if I write it down and then I don't do it?
Feel bad.
Yeah.
Feel guilty.
I feel worse. So writing a structure down that I can at least kind of semi-live by, and then if I can't, learning from it and creating a new structure. So the second thing, and I have a way longer version of this, but I'm just going to kind of summarize. The second one is I say we have to have a support team. And by support team, we need, for patients with eating disorders, they need to have a therapist, they need to have a dietitian, they need to have a medical provider, and most of my patients are on psychiatric meds. They need to have a psychiatrist. So having a full team. And for the poor dietitians, if any dietitians are listening, eating disorder patients, vote them off the island first.
Oh.
They're
Get
the
rid of
first
them.
one.
Yeah.
They're the first one that they get off because, number one, they don't want anyone telling them what to do. They know it all anyway. Insurance a lot of time doesn't pay for it. And then the second thing that they don't want is medications. And they don't want to stay on their medications. And we know for people with depression after an inpatient hospitalization, if they stay on their meds, the relapse rate decreases by 80%. So there's a reason to stay on your medications. But my patients don't like to be on their medications. So I always say having a team, getting support, and reaching out to who are your core people. And I like to use the palm of my hand and my fingers and my thumbs. Do you have 5 people in your life that you're real with, that they are your support, that you can be open and honest with? Which brings us to number 3 of what we need is honesty.
Ooh.
I was a compulsive liar. I don't know if you were.
That's the thing I do have a doctorate in, is lying.
But what kind of program do we run now?
An honest program. Yeah. And I do it with my kids. That's one of the things I took from Pinnacle is that, we run an honest program.
Yeah.
And it helps me be authentic and accountable for everything I do. And once I start lying to myself, look out.
Yeah,
But that sort of creates the same dilemma for the individual as writing it down. Now you have to do it.
Yeah.
And so it's hard. It's hard to be honest with others, including yourself.
Because you let them down. But I always tell my patients, I bet you've already let them down. And so, right? You've already disappointed everyone in your life.
Yeah.
So
surprise.
Yeah, exactly. So why not be honest now? And so I still really struggled with being honest in recovery because I'm a people pleaser. I'm a perfectionist. I didn't want to let people down. So I created a rule for myself, and I've passed it on to my patients, and it's called the 24-hour honesty rule. So basically, if I were to lie to you, Casey, I have 24 hours to be honest about that lie or the behavior. I don't have to be honest with you, though. I could be honest with Carrie. So I have my patients pick an accountability person. Who are they going to be honest with? And the goal is that we're going to narrow down that window. We're not going to leave it at 24 hours. But that's
just a jumping off point.
Yeah, that's the starting point because we know that if we are engaging back in our addiction for at least 72 hours, lapse from relapse is going to happen pretty quick.
Because I've done that before where, 24 hours I think, maybe I should call this person, and then 48 comes and I go, they probably don't even remember it. And then I feel like I got
away with it. And I'll get back on track myself, and I don't even need to know.
I feel like I got away with something. And then
exactly.
I go,
and that's that addict high,
Yep.
is I get away with it. And so that's why I used to lie about things I didn't even need to lie about, and I got a rush. Oh, I'm so smart. Look how I fooled them.
Yep.
Right? So the 24-hour honesty rule, I like them to start and narrow it down, and then I like them usually by the end of the day that they're checking in with their accountability person. So for a lot of my patients, since they've burnt down all their houses and they've taken out the whole neighborhood, I sometimes become that accountability person where they just send me an email. They tell me their behavior, what they did. They say, I'm going to be honest. And my response back is, thank you so much. Now what's the self-correction? Honesty is the first piece. Self-correction, and what am I going to learn from it becomes the second. So the next thing I like my patients to do, and this is anyone with an eating disorder and addiction, is you write down your eating disorder autobiography or your substance abuse autobiography, or for patients I have that have pornography problems, they write their autobiography down. It needs to be 10 pages typed. I want all the horrible behaviors of everything horrible they've ever done. So for me, admitting how I manipulated people, admitting I ate out of garbage cans. Who wants to admit that? Well, I didn't. So admitting that and writing it down. And some of the reason we have to write down our story and our history is because, number one, once you get into some recovery, you forget how bad it really was. It's like childbirth. We forget how bad it was.
I have 3 kids because of that.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't even give birth.
Exactly. You're like, it's fine. Raising teenagers is fine, right? So we write down our story so we can remind ourselves of how bad it got. So when we're going down that path again, we can say, oh, pull that out. No, I don't. This is where this leads me. But the second reason we write down our story is so we can share it with our 5 people.
Ooh, I bet that's hard for people.
Yes. So again, if one of my patients says, well, Nicole, my husband is one of my 5 support people. He's the closest to me. And I say, okay, well, we're going to bring him in this week and we're going to read your eating disorder auto to him. And they say, no way.
I don't want him to see me like that.
Yeah. I have all this shame. Well, then is he really one of your key people? Is he really a support if you're not allowing him to be? And you're not.
Ooh.
That's a lot of self-actualization for a person to be able to, number one, be that honest with themselves. You know, I'm sitting here thinking about, well, what would I write if I were to have to be that honest about my bad behaviors? Mm-hmm. And then, oh my goodness, trying to share that with somebody. So you probably do narrow it down to truly
a core group of people. Mm-hmm.
Trusting relationships.
At that point, do they ever change who their core 5 is?
Well,
or
they
try to?
Or they vote some off the island, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Right?
It might be hard to find. I mean, that's a lot of trust you're putting in 5
But it could
people.
be a professional. It could be your
Their
therapist,
therapist,
right?
yeah.
Because if you go into therapy and you can't even be honest in therapy,
which happens a lot
all the time, right? I went to a therapist and I lied every session. I just told my psychologist what she wanted to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you're listening to Project Recovery. We're talking with Nicole Hawkins with a Center for Change. We're talking about the 10 things you need in your backpack to help you recover. We're at to number 4. Join us in part 2 where we'll pick up with number 5.
The contents of this program are for informational purposes only. The program is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, licensed therapist, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard on this program. KSL does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the program. Reliance on any information provided on the program is solely at your own risk.